Mastering is art, ladies and gentlemen, and we understand that from a different perspectives and different points. I talked on my Instagram, on YouTube, and on many different things. However, do we understand what is the difference between, let's imagine, different limiters? So we don't have a single kind of limiters, we have multiple of them, and we use multiple of them within mastering. So that's the thing we're going to talk about this video. The first thing we want to cover is what is the difference between a conventional and an adaptive limiter. A conventional limiter controls the loudness of a signal by observing the peak amplitude, and it starts limiting once the threshold has been crossed. Multiband limiter works exactly the same but for different bands, so you have, let's say, a bit more flexibility. But now we have an adaptive limiter, and in this video we're going to use the CEDAR Audio Adaptive Limiter 2. An insane limiter. But this limiter does neither of these that a conventional limiter does. It's instead using a unique way of calculating a varying EQ profile that constrains the amplitude of the output while retaining the integrity of the input signal. This specifically means that you can easily achieve a very punchy, a very loud, and a very well-limited signals, in this case masters. And this is why these kind of limiters sound much more natural, much more loud, and much more punchy. So I'm technically doing a big favor here, since I'm showing you how adaptive limiter works, and this is what can make your master super loud. In this case we have the CEDAR Audio Adaptive Limiter 2. Now as you can see, this interface is very elegant, very simple to use, but let's understand the controls we have here. We have the standard threshold right here. Again, the threshold is used to determine when limiting occurs. We have the ceiling. Basically we can determine how much of that headroom we want to leave if we are mastering. For example, if you're limiting drums or other instruments, you can determine the exact peak value where your signal is going to peak, and it can't go above that value. And we have three knobs right here. But before we jump into what these three knobs do, since they are what make this limiter super unique, we have this bypass button, which we can bypass the plugin and turn it back on, and we have this oversampling. Oversampling basically means that we can run our signal through the higher sample rate in order to make sure we get as much quality as possible. This is how you can also prevent aliasing and additional distortion and other artifacts. Unlike other limiters, this limiter offers quantization settings such as noise shaping, dithering. This is basically what you want to do at the end of the chain just to make sure you work with the highest possible quality. Now we have these spectral, low frequency and high frequency knobs. This is what's very unique about this limiter. But before we move on to them, you have to understand what is the attenuation profile. So I'm going to play audio like this so I can show you this attenuation profile. The upper line right here, this orange one, shows the minimum attenuation at each frequency, while the lower line, this blue one, shows the peak attenuation at each frequency. So this is super tied up to this spectral knob. So this is what it does. As you basically increase the spectral value, you're allowing the attenuation profile to change more from frequency to frequency. You basically see how that works once I play some audio examples. If you set it, for example, this lowest setting right here, you can monitor this right here. The action of the adaptive limiter approaches that of a single band limiter, so like you're working with a single band limiter such as Pro 2 or any other limiters. But if we set this value to extreme values like this limiter is basically free to calculate a complex attenuation profile, like you can see here on the graph. And the key here is balancing the perfect amount of limiting you want. Now we have these two temporal controls. This is how they're called. These two temporal controls constrain the rate at which the attenuation profile, right here, changes at very low frequencies, this knob, and very high frequencies. If the two are not the same, the algorithm generates a suitable profile across the spectrum. So besides watching here, they also explain this super clear and super nice in their manual. So I'm going to post a screenshot right here. You're very free to pause the video and read for yourself. I highly recommend always reading the manuals. This is how you can learn how plugin operates. Now, since we walked through this limiter and we are now ready for some audio examples, I would like to mention that this limiter is super loud and super clear. Let's jump into some audio examples. I'm going to do multiple adjustments, multiple settings right here, so you can notice how powerful are adaptive limiters in comparison with conventional limiters. Conventional limiters are much easier to distort. These limiters almost can't distort.
Closer.
So this, ladies and gentlemen, concludes today's video. The goal was to show you how powerful adaptive limiter is, and this adaptive limiter too by CEDAR Audio. Definitely make sure to get this plugin. This is a very unique plugin and I don't really see any other adaptive limiters like this one. This one is purely insane. You know it because I personally use it at the machine stage. Absolutely incredible unit. I have analog limiters that I use within my analog chain. This one is incredible. If you want loud results, CEDAR Audio, adaptive limiter 2 should be your choice. See you in the next video.